Well, welcome. And thank you for accepting the invitation to join community events hosted by the Solidarity Building Initiative here at McCormick. I'm Gia Johnson, and I'm the program director for SBI.
And I am Grace Okerson, a graduate intern with SBI. If you're new to McCormick, throughout the year, McCormick offers a wide and diverse range of community events that center on issues of social concern and faith.
And the SBI team has been working diligently since last year to curate a 9-month community curriculum to host our public facing programs. And so our community events series is designed to shed light and offer insights on creating a better world for people in communities impacted by the criminal legal system.
When it comes to the daunting issue of mass incarceration, formerly incarcerated women, including trans women, have unique experiences that often get overlooked in public discourse and even in our social justice movement work. Between 1980 and 2019, the number of incarcerated women increased by more than 700%, and more than 60% of women in state prisons have a child under the age of 18.
According to the Sentencing Project, in 2019, the imprisonment rate for African American women was over 1.7 times the rate of imprisonment for white women. Latinx women were imprisoned at 1.3 times the rate of white women. And there has been a decline in the rate of imprisonment for African American women since 2000. However, the rate of imprisonment for white and Latinx women has increased. And so oftentimes trans women are left out of this conversation. And so while we want to recognize that trans women are not represented on tonight's panel, they're certainly not excluded from the conversation on women and incarceration. Out of the nearly 5,000 transgender people documented in 45 state prisons, including Washington, D.C., NBC News was able to confirm that only 13 transgender women are housed with other women, and 2 transgender men are housed with men in state prisons. And so this makes trans people, and in particular trans women, one of the most vulnerable and isolated groups behind bars. And so these startling realities demand our attention.
So we must work alongside formerly incarcerated women and system survivors to improve the conditions that compromise not only their flourishing, but also the flourishing of their children, loved ones, and communities. Throughout our 9-month series, we'll be highlighting the experience and work of formerly incarcerated women. Women who have been incarcerated will not only be a part of our discussions, shaping the work that we are doing, but they will also be facilitating and leading some of the sessions.
And March is Women's History Month. And so we must honor the stories and the wisdom of women that bring the stories that women bring to the table and the gifts that they give to our communities, not just in March, but all year round. But this evening's conversation, Beyond Bars, Women, Wisdom, and Holistic Healing, is an attempt to do just that.
Our conversation will center the voices and stories of women who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, as well as women who are co conspirators on the journey towards liberation. As survivors of state sanctioned and institutional violence and community healers, they will share the ways in which they honor and cultivate healing for themselves and for their communities.
And so before we get started with our conversation, we just have a few housekeeping items. We will have a Q&A session and with the panelists. So we invite you to submit your questions in the chat box or use the Q&A function. If you are joining us via Facebook live stream, we are glad that you are here. And so we will also be monitoring the comment section. So if you have questions, feel free to leave them there. And please do share with your community and do a oh my gosh, what is it called? I already lost it. Oh my God, what is it called, Grace?
A watch party.
Yes, do a watch party. All right, so I think that is it for our opening remarks.
Yes, so thank you all again for joining us tonight, and I would like to invite Avalon to take it away.
You're on mute, Avalon.
I realized that. Sorry about that, ladies. Thank you so much, Grace and Gia, for that introduction. I am excited and honored to be a part of this panel, to have this discussion about women and the wisdom and the holistic healing that we're having and that we are trying to implement in our particular communities. And so I'm going to read some brief bios for our panelists, and we'll ask them to turn on their cameras now. And I'll go through the bios, and then I'm going to have some directed questions to them. And then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. So we'll start with Andrea James. Andrea James, JD, is the founder and executive director of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. Her work is focused on ending incarceration of women and girls and contributing to the shift from a criminal legal system focused on police and prisons to a system led by directly affected people from within their neighborhoods and based on individual and community accountability. Welcome, Andrea. Regina Russell is a mother of the kidnapped with mamas. Her son, Taman Russell, was unjustly convicted of first-degree murder, despite overwhelming evidence that he was innocent, including a solid alibi and witness accounts, all which were ignored by the police. Her family motivates her to work hard, and she will continue to stand up for her son and will continue to fight for his freedom until he is released. Janae Strong is the executive director of Mamas. When she isn't writing, Janae is on a personal discovery of healing and is committed to healing Black girls everywhere, starting with herself and raising two beautiful children. Is it Akai and Jari? I was close.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry about that. And traveling throughout the continent of Africa. Latanya Jennifer Sublet experienced abuse and torture at the hands of Chicago police at the age of 19. Sentenced to 42 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections for a crime she did not commit, she did her very best to reinvent herself, earning 2 bachelor's degrees during her time of incarceration. She is now an active member of several Chicago social justice organizations advocating for human rights, social justice, prison reform, and sentencing reform. So welcome each and every one of you. We just thank you so much for your time here today. And what I'd like to start out with is I really want to kind of have you guys do just a short kind of introduction. Tell the audience one thing right now that you're working on to heal either yourself or your community. And then we'll go into specific questions. And I'd like to start with you, Janae.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Yes, so the work that I'm doing with Mamas, which is Mamas Activating Movements for Abolition and Solidarity, is really focused on expanding the notion of reproductive justice to really include the narratives of these mother survivors, as we call them, mothers of the kidnapped, because they've essentially been robbed of their ability to mother their children. Many of them have had their children taken away from them from adolescence and have had their children either be tortured and also incarcerated and or incarcerated and are still incarcerated now. So they have different kind of specific unique stories, but all of them connect to each other and have cultivated so many deep strategies of supporting each other because they all share the experience of being robbed of being mothers. And so that's what we really focus on and are pushing to expand the understanding of reproduction to include these stories.
And that is wonderful. I like the concept of redefining reproductive rights to include the concept of mothering, right? That is part of my rights. And I just want to make an audience note that Regina Russell is actually not going to be physically present, but her statement is going to be presented tonight. So I'd like to move on, kind of piggybacking on that, and move to you, Latanya. So tell us about something that you're working on that is either helping you heal or how you're helping to heal the community.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. The one thing that I am working on now that helps me is I think it's twofold because the work that I do for Heartland Alliance Health, I house individuals who face intersecting oppressions. So they experience mental illness, formerly incarcerated, domestic violence, disabilities, in recovery, and I help to get them housed. So when my participants get their keys to their apartment, they have once been homeless, once been some of everything, some of every life's issues. It just does something for me because I know how I felt when I stuck the key in my first free apartment. And my other work with Chicago Torture Justice System, working closely with the People's Law Office to free individuals who are torture survivors, who have yet been acknowledged, vindicated, working closely there still in that fight, showing up at court dates, just writing letters, sending cards, doing whatever we have to do to say to them, hold on, we're out here, we got you, we survived, you can make it. It's healing for me. I'm liberated, every time we get good news for one of our fellow survivors. And even when it's not so good news, that means we can't stop. So that's also healing for me.
Great, thank you so much. And Andrea, now it's your turn. What is something that you're working on that either helps you heal or how you're helping heal your community?
Well, first, I want to say, Avalon, I'm just so filled up right now to hear the work and the love that these sisters are doing. Joey Mogul's one of our comrades, People's Law Office. We've been there, getting down, learning, all of that. And so really, really happy to be on this with all of you. We have spent a few years going around the country, about 3 years going around the country doing town halls, kitchen table talks, small convenings, large convenings, everything we could to connect inside of prisons and outside of prisons with our sisters, and took all of that information and dumped it on the table and created our organizing, our hyperlocal organizing work called Reimagining Communities. And that was healing for us. And we intentionally named it Reimagining Communities because there had been a narrative that was being pushed with millions and millions of dollars being extracted from the abolitionist space by large nonprofits that weren't led by us. And their work was reimagining prisons. And we said, you know what? We're tired of reimagining prisons. And so we called our organizing project Reimagining Communities. And it's really our life. It's not just a project. And so that's incredibly healing for me. There's a number of components we learned from the sisters, Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, Rukia Lumumba, and the People's Assembly process. We learned from Mariam Kaba around transformative justice. We learned about participatory budgeting in Tennessee with Don Harrington and Free Hots. I mean, this is all work that is from the collective of sisters who at one time or another, we were all buried in a prison, and they're using, like everybody on just using their wisdom and their expertise to bring healing to our people.
Wonderful. So I'd like to go on to the next question. And I'm going to go back to you, Andrea. So, because you mentioned the wisdom, and I know you kind of touched on that, like just learning through these intimate gatherings, but sometimes large scale gatherings with the people on the ground, like talking to the people, women in prison, talking to women who've returned from prison, talking to their loved ones, just talking to everyone throughout the country to kind of glean like best practices. Where are the needs and things like that? So I really would like for you to kind of give us an example of like some of the wisdom that you got during that process, towards working towards the liberation of the bondage of, specifically for your organization, women and girls. But I know that spills over into eliminating the prison industrial complex writ large. But just share with the audience some specific wisdom that you gleaned during that process.
Well, I really think that we learned that we did a lot of work after we started to come home. We started our work in the federal prison for women in Danbury, Connecticut, and literally sitting in the prison yard. And we said, you know, Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, had just come out. There was a big exposure of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, and the architects of mass incarceration, the Koch brothers, and so forth. And you know, we learned a lot from that, but we didn't hear the voices of us. We didn't hear about the immediate things that we were doing, trying to mother from a payphone in a prison. And we didn't hear anything from really back in 2010 from directly affected people, men or women. And so we didn't know how sitting in that prison we were going to have our voices heard, but we did, you know, lay the gauntlet down and say, we are going to figure out a way to have our voices heard. What happened though, Avalon, is that we worked very hard over the years to not only as the discourse upticked, men, formerly incarcerated men became centered in all of this work, still not hearing from us. And then we worked hard to create that platform for formerly incarcerated women to have their voices heard. But what we realized is, and what we implore of our sisterhood is, and we unapologetically advocate on behalf of women and girls. We are women and girls, and that's what we're not afraid to say that. But what we learned is that our people, we're not all politicized. And our experience, our direct experience of being incarcerated women is our experience. And we have every right to talk about that and to share how it affected us individually, our families, our children, et cetera. What we don't have a right to do is if we don't educate ourselves, if we don't teach ourselves, if we don't read, if we don't understand the historical context for what got particularly Black folk to where we are with incarceration in this country as an effort of post-slavery, and that structural racism is every bit a part of this, we will find ourselves just taking advantage of a platform because it's been created, but not understanding that we have to be educated in that so that we don't end up carrying water for people who cause us a great deal of harm. And so I think we've learned that, and we've created the Liberation Project and some other training opportunities for all of us. We never stop learning, and we encourage that. We do struggle sessions. I think that's a very important thing, that we realize it's not enough to have that experience of being on a prison bunk. You have to learn, you have to study if you're going to step into this space of effectuating policy and other things.
Excellent. And that is so true. That, I mean, as we have seen in this prison reform space, that they don't address the root of what the prison industrial complex is. And it's a system built on racism, classism, ableism. And it was intended to mete out racism, classism, and ableism. And if we don't recognize that that's what it was intended to do, we keep perpetuating this narrative of it's broken. It's not broken. It is working as intended. And we need to recognize that. And if we don't educate ourselves to that understanding, then we're kind of perpetuating this. We keep feeding the system then. We keep it in existence because we don't address the underlying root of what it actually is. And so I think that is an excellent point, is to continue to educate yourself on what is this really about? And then how do we change it? How do we dismantle it, burn it down, rebuild something new that is for our communities? And so, Janae, I would like to then address that question to you. I turned myself off, sorry. What is some wisdom that you have acquired in this liberation process that you've embarked upon?
Yeah, absolutely. This is actually a really amazing time to bring in Regina's words as well. So I'm just gonna share a little bit about it. And she says, let me actually, so it says, it's not asking too much to be treated with dignity. After all, we are human beings with feelings. And Everyone makes mistakes. Black and brown shouldn't be dehumanized because of them. Society ridicules Black and brown women when they are incarcerated, and that holds true when they are released as well. Whatever happened to rehabilitation does not exist. These are skills that they should receive in prison: life skills, parenting class, group therapy, financial security, job readiness. And when they're released, it should be a community center where they could go to live and reinforce the skills that they learn. This thing called life is never easy, but you must push through it. If you have some struggles, you have to reposition yourself and ask for help. And you will be surprised of who the universe will bring your way. And so that comes from Regina. And I think that one of the things that I have learned and really been honored to learn in working with these mothers is just how intimately and immediately they know how to support each other. Like saying, hey, I know that prosecutor, I know that judge, this is the workaround to get this commissary to them more immediately and efficiently. This is the workaround for this or that. And they've really built up so many strategies because they're always sharing resources, because it really is their lifeline to be able to support their children. And so in that way, the wisdom that I really hold on to, and why we're so really just strong in advocating for them, their voices being included, to Andrea's point, is because they have so many tools and strategies that are just not being amplified and just not being made visible.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing Regina's words with us. We appreciate that, especially in her absence. And she has value to add to this conversation, and we want to lift her voice in this space as well. And so, Latanya, I'm going to go ahead and direct that question to you as well.
When I first came home, quite honestly, I wanted to be just basic. I felt like I had fought for 21 years. I had exhausted every legal remedy that there were, made available to us. I've helped people write grievances. I was tired of fighting. I really just wanted to get home, get an apartment, get a cat, and be basic, honestly. So I went about my everyday life trying to be basic. During my time of unemployment, I sought a temporary agency. So I got a job at a place called the American School. It's in Lansing. And I got there, and quite honestly, because I had studied so hard while I was incarcerated, because I had done everything that I thought I was supposed to do, I looked around and I said, I can take this place over. I got it. The person that sat next to me had been there since 1977, and they had not furthered their education. They didn't know how to create an Excel spreadsheet. They couldn't. So I said, I got this. So the good thing in that is that the president of the school saw me, and she said, not only am I going to hire you from the temporary agency, I am going to make you my vice president. So I'm like, yes, formerly incarcerated. Who said I was going to sit here? Who said that I was going to have my own office, and I'm in meetings and I'm representing for my sisters is all I could think about. That it didn't last. It didn't last because there was some hateration all up in that dancery of some people who had been there for 15 years who had not done anything, said, who is this Black girl that walked in and, is taking over? They Googled my name and they came up with a conviction from 1992. And they spread all of my business like mayonnaise all over. Can you imagine you're hearing the whispers and you really want to think it's about your promotion, but it's really not. So when it was brought to me, I was broken because I said to myself, I did everything that I was supposed to do, but I can't work there anymore. And I was angry. And I said, you know what? I'm getting ready to sue. I'm going to sue this American school. This is going to be called Latanya School. They're going to let me work there. Matter of fact, I'm going to run the whole school. And as I pursued it, the wisdom that came to me was, baby, you're not basic. Nothing about your life has been basic. So why were you trying to assimilate? This is not your place. You've been a soldier. You've been fighting this war. That's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. And it was something as heartbreaking as not being able to fit in this so-called American dream that let me know if I had to step forward and say, never ever will I take a position where they don't know. I was convicted by this system of injustice, by jurors of my peers. I'm not going to take a position without you all knowing that, because that is my story. That is what makes me who I am. In all my glory, you love me until you hear that. And that was the coming of wisdom for me. So now, the worst thing that has ever happened to me has made space for me, or I would not be here amongst you beautiful women, you know. So the wisdom is, we're not basic. You know, we didn't create it. It was given to us, and we have to carry it, and we pass the baton. And every day I wake up and I say, everything that I do today is for my sisters that may never get this opportunity. And for the ones who do, and they come behind, line up aside of me, I'm gonna pass the baton. I'm gonna pass the baton because people fought for me to do this. Other formerly incarcerated women have gone before me, and I was trying not to carry on that legacy, but I am her, and I am here, and I ain't going nowhere. So
Well, that deserves some snapping for sure. And oh my goodness, we're not basic. I
no,
love it. I love that right there. We are not basic.
not
And
at
and that
all.
is true because you know you have to, at some point you're going to have to walk in your truth. And I'm glad, I'm sad that getting you to this place was an additional traumatic event on top of everything else that you
Yeah.
went through. But I am um very appreciative of the fact that you are walking in your truth at this particular point and embracing all of who you are and walking in the door saying, this is who I am and this is what I come to bring. You better get ready.
Yes.
You better get ready. And so I am so excited. I love that. I love that. We're not basic. I'm gonna take that. So I'm just letting you know, I'm taking that from you, sis. It's gonna be mine. I'm gonna be
That's
using
okay.
it, and I'll give you all the credit, Latanya. Like, I got that from Latanya. So
I have one request.
yes,
So my request is, okay, you can take that, but please include me in some of the spaces that you say that.
absolutely.
Okay.
That's a promise.
I want to be there. Yeah.
Most definitely. So, man, I just feel I'm so excited about this conversation that we're having. It's uplifting, and I think that it's also providing us with a little healing as well, so that we can take these things and these pieces and we can take them from each other and actually bring them into our space to help us heal. So I'm going to stick with you, Latanya. And I want to, because you talked about passing the baton, and that was a
Yes.
great segue into what I want my next question to be. It says, what lessons do you want to pass on to others doing this work based on your experience?
I would have to say I want to pass on that we're always going to create the space. Like we can't wait for the space for them to say, come on in. We've been waiting on you. You know, all of us are path treaders, regardless that we're doing the same work. We will all be in different spaces at different times. So what I would say to my sister is don't be afraid to go before, because you may not get the baton, but you may be able to pass it. So if there is a space where you have to tread, if you say, why are they asking me? I don't know, go. Because if you don't go, then it won't be heard. Because there's no guarantee that all of us will be in the same space again at the same time. So when I see you go, then I know our work gets done. So as hard as it is sometimes, the baton may not be passed to you. It may be for you to pass it. So show up, show yourself approved, and kick the door in and let them know, not only am I here, and I know you just see me, but if you only knew who rides alongside of me and who we represent, you would lean back, because we're definitely going to lean forward. Definitely.
Excellent. So Janae, I'd like for you to kind of add your part to it. Like, so what would you share based on the experience that you've had in this space with someone who's trying to either get in this space or that's in this space or starting or something like that? What would you share with them?
Yeah, absolutely. Regina also has a really beautiful piece in this that we've seen in so many of these stories. And it's really, I'm going to just go straight into her words. And she says that women have always been the backbone of the family, and holding the family together by any means necessary. And so the wisdom that Regina is sharing is, don't be afraid to ask for help. This is where I fell short, because I didn't let anybody know what I was going through. I suffered for 18 years holding on to my hurt and pain inside, always smiling on the outside, going about my day screaming for help on the inside. I knew that if I break all the way down, what would happen to my youngest daughter? So I stood between the gaps to make sure all of what she needed was met. And it wasn't until I spoke out to one of my dear friends, Joe Eiselbaker, regarding my son, that's when my life turned around. God had finally heard my cries for help and peace, and I got the strength and help to fight another day, not only for my son, but for other mothers going through the same pain. And again, this is something that we heard from so many of the mothers, is that they saw another mother speak up and advocate. They didn't, like Latanya saying, didn't wait to be invited to speak, spoke up. And then another mom was like, that's my story. And then also spoke, right? And so just what Mamas is doing is actually just trying to be intercessors, just trying to create a container, just trying to provide a space where we're saying that we're going to always listen to you, we're going to always center you, and we're going to always amplify your voices, your stories, your needs, and leverage whatever we can to provide access to policy tables, to provide access through op-eds, to provide access through connecting you to these other kind of organizational spaces, right? That are not necessarily explicitly inviting your voice, but we're gonna take your lead and we're gonna insert your voice because it needs to be heard.
Wonderful. And I love how you said asking for help, right? Sometimes we feel, especially in this space, the stigma that comes with having been touched by the carceral system, right? And so we feel like we don't have the ability to ask for help. The shame that comes with this experience, whether we are directly impacted as far as if we're the ones who have been in prison or our loved one has been in prison. And so society has created this space where we don't feel safe, right? We don't feel safe to be who we are. We don't feel safe to ask for help, because what now you are judging me as a mother or as a person, and so we can't even get to the place where we're helping me get the help I need, because we're too busy attaching judgment and labels to us in this space. And so Andrea, I'm going to go ahead
Absolutely.
and throw it to you, and I appreciate that. Throw it to you. So what would you pass on to someone who is either sharing this space with you, trying to come into this space, on some of the things that you've learned in this liberation process?
Wow. I've learned so many things. I think one of the things that I learned the hard way, and I do mean the hard way, and I still have to, just be silent sometimes and compose myself. Is that not everybody? We're not a monolith community, not in the sense of being formally incarcerated, meaning the whole picture, white, black, like Latinx, whatever. We're not monolith in that cohort of formerly incarcerated people. We're not monolith as Black women. And doing this work, we also have different agendas. There's a massive ecosystem in the criminal legal reform and abolition space. And if we don't understand that, regardless of how we think, I'm very, very passionate about liberation on behalf of my people, and I'm unwavering in that. And Cassandra Frederick, my dear comrade, Cassandra Frederick, who's now the ED, go girl, of Drug Policy Alliance. I remember when she was a young cub when I first came home, but she's now the ED. Cassandra said something one day at a convening we were at a couple of years ago. She said, look, if you decide to get off the freedom train, don't derail it for the rest of us. And I hold on to those words because I'm very passionate about the liberation of Black people. I am acutely aware of the historical context of how we got here. And having said that, we do operate within an ecosystem where there are all kinds of folk with direct experience that are not a monolith by any means. And if we don't find a way to balance ourselves and in that, because we can become very angry, that anger can take us in a different direction and off of our center in terms of how we continue to move through this work. And I've had to learn because there was a time, and I can go from 0 to 80 in a minute, but I had become very bitter and very angry, and I don't want to be bitter, and I want to be love. I want to be love. And that was something that I had to figure out how to navigate personally, and still be very passionate about how I feel and unapologetic. And like Latanya said, I do show up in spaces and I speak my truth without hesitation and make it very clear of where I stand in the spectrum of the ecosystem. But I also know that I don't have to try and, be the one to sway everybody to think like I do. I'm responsible. There's a saying, what is it of yours to do? And I had to learn that. Otherwise you hurt yourself. You become hot and your hot becomes hot. And I, had to go back to my meditation and different practices that silence. There's, God's words are in silence, in the silence. And if we can breathe and hear our breath, we will hear those words, and it'll give us solace. And it will move our feet where they need to go, and our words and our brain and everything else. So I did have to learn that. And it was a hard road for me until I got peace with that. And just yesterday, I was knocked off my center with that. So it's a practice. It doesn't just happen and stay that way. It's something, but understanding that and recognizing your triggers helps you to be recentered.
Excellent. And that is so true, because we all come into this space or into this world with our own perceptions, our own beliefs, our own ideas about certain things based on our experiences, based on a variety of different things. And so, I mean, I've had, and I understand where you are, because I've had these kind of very tense conversations with people about people first language and how some people are like, well, I don't care. I don't care if we use the word inmate. I don't care if somebody calls me a felon. And I'm just thinking like, okay, we may not need, we probably not gonna be able to have this conversation, you know, or I'm gonna have to change some of how I'm approaching this conversation because
Mhm.
I'm not with you, and I don't know if I can ever get with you. So I definitely can appreciate that, and that's not something that personally I have thought of. Is that um, we are we're not monolith, and we have to make sure that as we operate in this space, like you said, if you leave the freedom train, don't burn it down. Like, just make sure that you just leave it, just, be gracefully bow out and allow others to continue the work that they feel like they are purposed to do. And so you guys are, this setup is so amazing because you always end with a great segue to the next question, is because now I want to talk about self-care. So Andrea, you talked about meditation. What other self-care do you use in to help you while you navigate this space?
Well, I'm really bad at that actually. And I do meditation in very short spurts because I can't like sit there for 20 minutes even. But it works, just small doses of it, really just centering yourself and feeling your breath, following your breath. But I get massages, and you have to get a massage. And thank goodness, I've been going to the same place for so long, and they have this whole intricate system of giving massages and safely and so forth. They reopened just very recently, but very safe. But to get a massage, you have to get up, because I can very easily be on what I'm doing right now since the pandemic, from 8 o'clock in the morning till, last night we had an international call. Sisters were in Australia. It was 12 o'clock in the afternoon there. It was 8 o'clock at night for us. We got sisters in Zambia, so I got to get up and do this at the crack of dawn tomorrow because that's the time frame that they can work in. So my schedule is just grueling, and I've had to make sure that I find ways. And a massage is something that helps to move the toxins out of your body. I drink a lot of water. I keep 2 bottles of water next to my bed every night, and I drink those at night, because I don't sleep well. So I wake up and I chug a whole bunch of water. And I do go and get massages because you have to get up and leave and go outside, and all of a sudden the fresh air gets to you and you get to go and get the massage. And that just is amazing. And so it helps me to do that.
Excellent. So Janae, I'm gonna go to you. What do you do to practice self-care to help you as you navigate this space?
One of the things that I think really got solidified in working with the mothers of the kidnapped and working with mamas was just how much centering my time with my children was actually a part of my joy, and just how much I was compartmentalizing my identity as a mother in the organizing space, because it was being seen as something that was either, and of course not, intended or conscious, but because of the systems that we internalized, either seen as a distraction to the very urgent work that needs to be done in the streets. Like, it's a very, high energy and kind of, I would say, even just kind of like patriarchal pace, right? Where you always have to be fighting, you always got to be, out there, and really didn't do service to what I understand about care and nurturing of my children. Just saying, hey, mommy, you're stressed, or not even then vocalizing it, but just being like, mommy, I want to dance. Mommy, like, come watch a movie with me. And I'm just like, you're right. I should take a break. I should watch you grow up, and then like having that be solidified by, again, what comes back up with the moms is what they hold about their children, and that being able to get them through so many moments. What they notice about their children, even when they're on those calls, right? That they still can carry that weight and that joy and that nurturing just with their voice. And so I think that being able to understand the deep aliveness that can actually build our space in a more expansive way as we fight, and hopefully heal too, that is really unique to those of us who, and not just biologically, but those of us who just care for other human beings, right? So being able to lean into that, yeah.
And that is a radical thought, that my healing, my care is inextricably intertwined with my caring for others, so that it is connected. And it's what, especially as us as just
I love how you said
nurturing
that.
creatures, right? Like
Yeah.
we were designed to nurture, and that our self-care, us being true to who we are and identifying and elevating that part of us, is magnified in that moment where we decide that caring for our children, biological, non-biological, our or loved ones in general, is a practice, is some self-care. And I, thinking about that, like you, that just touched me like in a really deep way, because I never thought of it that way. And I thank you for sharing that, because that's some deep thought right there. And so, Latanya, I'm going to go ahead and bring that question to you. What do you do to practice self-care?
I'm reminded of, because sometimes it's so hard, when you are trying to tread the path, create a path, take care of everybody, you forget about yourself. Um, but I was reminded of when I used to sit on the top bunk, and I would say to myself, when I get home, I just want to take a hot bath and drink some tea and a big comfortable couch, and I want to smell good, and I want to and that is self-care for me, to remember the things that once upon a time I didn't even know if I was going to make it to. I had an out date, but was I going to make it to it? You know what I mean? So now I spend my time. I take baths. I have 17 different kinds of teas in there. Uh, they all healing teas. But I just make myself remember that when you get done with all of this, once upon a time, you wanted a bath. You wanted to be able to have a choice of deodorant, spray some perfume, not wear just plain old white underwear. You wanted to be able to choose what color, so things like that make me feel very, very good, to know that I have every option there is in the world. And I choose a hot bath, a Netflix binge, you know, being with my mom and letting her tell me stories that she told me before, because I'm in her house listening to these stories, and not over the phone saying you have 1 minute left, you know. So I'm always reminded of the very simple things. Now, but don't get me wrong, don't let the designer purses fool you. I dreamed about them too. But but no, I take care of myself by remembering that when it's all said and done with, a nice pair of footies, my feet feel good. Simple things is what I cried for, I prayed for, and I have them. And that's how I take care of myself.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I'm a tea girl too, so I'm with you on that, honey. And I love the thought of just keeping it simple, right? Saying I'm just gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna think about the things that I missed when I couldn't have them, and then I will use those things to help me take care of myself now that I do have them.
Yes.
So I couldn't take a bath, but now that I can take a bath, I'll use that as a way to help me heal, feel better, be more mindful
Mhm.
of my space, of where I am right now, and appreciative. They always talk about the gift of gratitude, right? Like the gift of gratitude, like to be grateful for those things, big and small. And so, honey, I am with you on the bath and on the tea. So I love that. And I too remember thinking like, oh, I can't wait, when you can have access to it and you don't even think about it. And then the minute you don't, it's just those things is like, I can't wait to just simply have a bath or
Yes.
tea, things like that. So I definitely understand that. And I definitely think that that's important to note, that let us take, let us be mindful and grateful for those little things, and then use those things that we missed and now
Yes.
have again to help us heal and be better.
Yes.
Excellent. Oh my goodness, I am loving this conversation. This is I'm so glad that we're having this conversation tonight. So I'm gonna stay with you, Latanya, because I want to ask, especially in the space that you're operating, like, what do you see um, people doing in real time to kind of help the community heal? And it doesn't have to be like the whole community, but things that will result in communal healing. What are you seeing on the ground that's working in the space that you're in?
So ultimately, I really believe us as human beings, we we all are looking to be validated in our own way. What I see that Chicago Torture Justice Center does is we invite the community to our Rise meetings every second Saturday of the month. What I have learned on the ground, what is healing is to be heard, because we're talking about a community whose voices have been dismissed, diminished, on every level. You don't qualify, you're less than. So when we open up our spaces and say, you are qualified just because, whether it's through trauma, whether it's because you live in this community and you saw the trauma, maybe it's not you directly, but then it becomes directly, but you deserve to be heard. How do you feel? Let that anger out. We have generations and generations of anger, of not being acknowledged, being silenced, being misrepresented. And I think when we give room and space to everyday voices and we qualify them, just because you exist, you don't really even have to tell me any type of story. If you just want to sit there and be in community, you qualify. So I think I see that with CTJC, and I see how people, well, pre-COVID, but we do it Zoom now. But I used to see how people would leave that space and they felt empowered, just because they had the opportunity to get up and say, it's not right. Why is it still happening? My nephew, my daughter, I need to tell it to somebody, because our communities are not set up where, we get the help that we need. The government doesn't send us money to provide those things in our community. So it takes us to provide these spaces. So what I see is that when we make the room and we allow the community to come in and say, I count, not because it was me, but because that next door neighbor, I watched him play ball all my life and I saw the police kill him. Your voice gets to be heard. You get to say something, and not as a witness for the police. You get to say it in your own community. You get to say it and be angry about it. I think that works because I've seen it and I know it works. Because if it works for us, to tell our stories, what about the people who've been told, oh, what you talking about? It? Oh, that doesn't count. Give everybody a voice because we have a platform. Let's not dismiss that everybody has a voice.
Excellent. I love that. I love you're automatically qualified. You walked in the door, that made you qualified. And that we're going to give you this safe space to speak. So, Janae, I saw you took yourself off mute. I was going to come to you next anyway. So go ahead and tell me, what are you seeing on the ground that's working to help bring communal healing in the spaces where you are? What's working?
I just wanted to say, Latanya, like everything that you say is just so juicy and so good and so rooted and so grounded. And I'm just so glad to be with all of you all. And Latanya, I'm just finding so much deep resonance from your experience. And so thank you for sharing. And I'll just say, in terms of, as someone who is trying to really push on these growth edges of our like organizing space, where you have folks who have organized for 10 plus years and they've done this and they've done that, and really can benefit so much from kind of taking a step back and centering voices of folks who actually have gone through the actual lived, embodied mental, emotional, spiritual experience of being locked in a cage. It's so real, and it's just coming through so glaringly through the time with the moms, but also through what you said. And so I just want to round that out by saying that what I'm seeing happen is this conversation around abolition. We're very intentional about saying movements and support of abolition, solidarity for abolition, right? And that we understand that everyone is in their own journey of like understanding what abolition looks like. But I just want to name that what you are speaking to through an experience, like creating just spaces for folks to be heard. And like you said, and not as a witness to a police, but to say, actually, I have this on me and I need to put this somewhere that is safe, is a actual tool. That's an actual strategy. That's an actual alternative. And I think that sometimes when you think about abolition, or we think about, alternatives to the next question is, well, if we don't have police, then what will we have? And it's like, we'll have each other, And I think sometimes, and I'm gonna forget it because I'm trying to be brief, but whomever said, sometimes we give our power away, right? And so, yeah, just affirming that we do have the tools, and I've seen that and I've heard that.
So yeah, we're down to a couple minutes, Andrea. So I kind of want you to put out there, just talk a little bit about something that you're seeing on the ground. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put you on the spot. That's what I'm going to do. Can you just share with the audience about this new program that you launched today, that is providing monthly universal income with no stipulations to women who were formerly incarcerated for a year? So can you just talk about that program? I'm so excited about it.
And I know our time is short, so I'm so filled up. I feel the love, the energy. I'm so grateful for you, Avalon, for bringing me into this space with these beautiful sisters. I needed this. And thank you to all of you. I don't want us to have to hang up and I don't get an opportunity to say how much love and connectivity I feel with all of you right now. We were invited to consult on an initiative called the Compton Pledge. There's 125 mayors around the country had created a project where it's called the basic income guarantee. And other countries, mostly the Southern African countries, have done this for years. And Latanya said it, she said, I wrote it down, you automatically qualify. That's what we're talking about. We have been so marginalized. We have been so required to prove ourselves, to jump through hoops, but we are human beings like everybody else. And we deserve to be able to live and have our basic necessities met. And so we were asked to consult on this project, and we said, yeah, it's good. And mayor's okay. But we had just come off of a 5-year look back on a people's budget project and realized that our communities had not been invested in, and there was a level of austerity that was just astounding in the investment in our people. And so we decided that we didn't want any more government entities creating projects like that. And we were going to demonstrate that that formerly incarcerated women, we know who are the most vulnerable among us in our neighborhoods, and that we were going to create the model that on our own, without being under the constraints. Because anytime the government gets involved, it's an issue for us. Without being under those constraints, we were going to create this guaranteed income, basic income guarantee, and provide it to the sisterhood just because you exist, just because you are in need, just because that, with no strings attached. Nobody is telling you, you do whatever you want to do with that money, but every month you're going to get $500 through the basic income guarantee. It's a pilot project over 2021, but we already, and we created the Community Love Fund. That's the container that we raise and hold the funds in. And so by 2022, we anticipate amongst our sisterhood around the country doing this in all of our neighborhoods, and the sisters in the neighborhood like the sisters inside, and it includes our sisters in the prison, because our communities do not stop at the prison door. They get to decide. We know sister is vulnerable, her children aren't eating well, her children need some care. And this is just another way for us to take care of ourselves, because ain't nobody coming to save us.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So we're going to move into the Q&A section of tonight's event. And so we will we'll look at the questions to see if we have any. I'm going to go into Q&A. I don't see any.
There was one, I'll just say that
I'm trying to
did
see.
notice, and I'll be quick about it, but
Yeah, I
somebody
was
did
trying
ask,
to
how
look
do
to see.
people who are not formally incarcerated engage? And we have
Here it is. Yeah.
that coalition of folks called People Not Prisons. And it's made up of people that are not formally incarcerated, because we center and lead with women who have had that direct experience, but and the women who cared for us while we were in prisons on those bunks. But we have a phenomenal coalition that's growing called People Not Prisons. And that is a coalition. We meet every Saturday. And folks, we have researchers, doctors, lawyers, academicians, statisticians, everyday people who come from different communities where this isn't really an issue, but they know that they can't sit on the sidelines and do nothing. And what they do is they follow the lead of the sisterhood in the projects. They show up, they come to protest, they're extra hands, minds, hearts for the work that we do.
Excellent. I did see one of the questions that says, have there been any positive changes in the justice system since your release that have brought some healing to your story? So that question would be directed to Latanya or Andrea, or both. You can go, Latanya.
So I don't know if I can consider it the justice system. I work really hard every day to fight these punitive collateral consequences that we still face when we're released. Something that happened in Chicago with the Just Housing Act. There's a limit to which they can deny you housing. So that's something to me that really has changed the game for those of us coming home from prison, trying to rebuild ourselves and try at the second chance that you say you give us. That's been something very monumental. As far as, as long as this is probably going to sound very crazy. I don't know. As long as the justice system, the system of injustice is what I call, as long as it still exists, to me, there is no, until it is, done with, because reform, every time you all come up with a reform, what it does is further isolate and ostracize people. And you say, again, you're not qualified, based on this, but if you this and if you that, you know what I'm saying? When reform and justice, just the fact that you've been incarcerated should be enough, but they have all of these other things. So it's really challenging for me to say, from a legal standpoint, if there have been, and I'm sure there may have been, but every time I see something happens to me, I still feel like it affects yet another person. Like I can tell my one sister over here, well, guess what? Now you can have your record expunged because they included these crimes. But guess what? Because you have to register for the murder registry, you can't have your record expunged until after you get off the murder registry. What? So you understand what I'm saying? It's like it works over here, but it doesn't work over here. When it works for me is when everybody qualifies.
I love it. So what about you, Andrea? Have you seen any positive changes?
Well, I'm of the school that there is no legitimacy to this criminal legal system. Having said that, I think just our listserv at the National Council, I think, is a beautiful expression of change. I'm a former criminal defense lawyer, and so we wrote the primary caretaker bill that created some diversion from our sisters having to go inside. My baby boy was 6 months old when I went to prison, and they sent me 2 states away from where I lived, and my baby girl at the time was 12. That meant a lot to me for us to get that moving, and it's now being worked on in 15 other states. We have launched on Biden's inauguration day, the national campaign to end incarceration of women and girls, and we mean it. That national campaign is up and going. The first leg of that is the clemency campaign. We refused to ask Trump. We did work with President Obama, and we were able to push 50 of the 102 women out, many of them who were serving life with no parole. That's something that, we did, that I'm happy that we did. Those women are home. Danielle Metz is the head of our clemency work, and she was the last woman that under Obama that we were able to push out. She was serving life with no parole at 26 years old. They sent her to prison and expected her to be there for the rest of her life. So when we have the opportunity to do work like that, I know we have to stay in this fight because anything we do, I'm always afraid that it's going to give legitimacy when we do not believe that there is this system was built post-slavery to continue to oppress and control our labor. And so there is just no legitimacy. Abolition is alive and well in wealthy white communities all around this country. And so until we realize that this stuff is just made up really it was centered in slavery and rooted in slavery. I'm always afraid of legitimizing it in any way, but I am happy that we are in the positions that we're in. We're back in that fight. We refuse to ask Trump for anything, but we are back in that fight with President Biden. And on March 12th, we'll be in DC. It's the 50th day of his first 100 days, and we're asking him to commute the sentences of 100 women in the first 100 days. And I did have the privilege of speaking to his White House team about that this afternoon. And so those are things that we are happy that we exist in this space to do.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. The other question that I have, we have a couple more questions, is what are some ways people who haven't been incarcerated be allies to those who have been incarcerated? So, Janae, I think, especially from your perspective, because of the network that you work in, being mothers with children or loved ones that are with children specifically that are incarcerated, can you just shed some light on that question for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me see here. This is one of the ways that many of the mothers that we know, how we got tapped into them is we're based in Chicago, but we actually talk to mothers in different geographies. But for the ones in Chicago, many of them have been for upwards of 2 decades, been working with the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression,
Yes.
right? So CPAC. And so that here in Chicago is an entity that is saying that there is no type of reform, right? And so we very much believe what Sister Andrea is saying. And so CPAC is actually trying to, at the local legislative space, do something that actually is like both harm reduction immediately, but actually building towards an accountability, a real accountability board for the police in Chicago, right? It's something that I could just say from my time as organizing against the Chicago Police Department, whether it's, you know, being in solidarity with CTCJ and the survivors of the John Burge torturing. And let's be clear, John Burge is one person, and we know that Homan Square continues, right? It's still a Black site. We understand that, you know, what has been done in Chicago is only a piece of what needs to be done, right? But these are things that have been continually worked on through decades. I want to underscore that piece, through decades, by folks who are both centered in that experience and centered in terms of having been locked in a cage and having their children ripped from them and then to be thrown in a cage after being tortured. And then with layers of folks who are organizers, young people like myself, folks who are just completely incensed with rage for the way the system is working so efficiently and swiftly against Black and Brown and Indigenous bodies. And so what I would say is that being able to find the spaces in which this work is happening. So for Chicago, CPAC, CTCJ, Mamas, there's so many different organizations that are actually in Chicago that I'm not gonna remember, but we'll definitely list so that I can go in the email. But like attending those meetings, becoming informed, signing those petitions, there's just so many entry points and that are also so vast that it can align with whatever is actually going to be the way that you have the most capacity, right? So just so that folks don't get paralyzed by the thought or the idea of I don't share this experience or I don't really know much about it. There's so many entry points at different levels that everyone, absolutely everyone can and should get involved.
And the advice that I would give piggybacks on what Andrea was saying about those of us that are actually in the space. Educate yourself. Like educate yourself. Read a book. You know, Miriam Kaba just came out with a book. We do this till we free us. Yes, mine is right here. Woohoo! Right. So read a book. There are a lot of things. Critical Resistance has a lot of online stuff. There's Abolition Journal has information if you go on their website. Educate yourself, but also proximate. Like Brian Stevenson says, get proximate to the problem. You don't have to have been directly impacted by the problem. Get proximate to the problem. That means aligning yourself with those who have been so that you can and be willing to hear what they have to say. And again, just putting yourself in that position. Another question that says, and we're down to almost 6 minutes, what is some advice you would give your younger self today? What advice would you give young ladies in this age of time? So I'm gonna start with you, Latanya, and then we're gonna go to you, Andrea, and then you, Janae.
I'm, to be as brief as I can, when I graduated from Julian High School, and I honestly felt like when it was time for me to graduate, they was like, if you don't get out of here, because I did not believe that I was smart. So it was something that I learned in prison, that intellect was cultivated if you just put a little time into it, So that's what I would have said to my younger self, that if you just put a little time into it, because with that comes other things, your self-worth, your self-esteem, you know, how you see the world as opposed to how you're trying to make the world see you. And it's sad that I learned that in prison, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. You know, that I literally could be in the worst situation and be anybody that I wanted to be. I still had the opportunity to become. So I think I would tell my younger self that you have the rest of your life to become, cultivate it. And don't let anybody tell you that Black girls don't, Puerto Rican girls don't. Don't let anybody tell you what we can't do, because then the system starts to tell you what you gonna do.
Mm. Ooh,
And
that
that's
was
what happened
good.
to me.
That
So,
was good.
right, as a young woman, you can be it. Because if you don't step up and be it for yourself and cultivate it, the system will tell you.
Mm. What about you, Andrea?
Well, you know, I
Tell your
know I'm
younger
in
self.
the right place now. I know the energy is flowing between amongst us because we just decided 2 days ago that we wanted to our young we have a whole young brilliant that are taking over the organization, everything. And we've decided that we want to give some space for just that, for us older women to send messages to the younger women, particularly our baby girls who are locked in cages. And so we're recording things, and the older sisters are putting messages in for the girls. For me, um, I would say it's emotional intelligence. We learn about reading and writing, you know, the three I's, as they call them: reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever we do. And nobody ever introduces us to this concept of emotional intelligence. And it's what landed me on a prison bunk at the age of 45. I mean, I'm 56 years old right now. You know, I've been somebody's mama since I was 19. And I have grandbabies, right? And so um, I did not learn about emotional intelligence until I was, you know, on a prison bunk. And I read a book and I couldn't believe it because in Danbury, they didn't have nothing but what I can't even, Daniel Sheet Single, I can't remember the name of the books, but they had all these kind of drama, love drama type of things. And it was horrible for me because I read nonfiction and I couldn't find any, but I couldn't believe it. There was a book that my uncle gave me. My uncle was the first Black tenured law professor at UCLA. My uncle gave me a book by an author named Daniel Goleman called Emotional Intelligence. And he put that book in my hand when I started law school. And he said, Andrea, I'm going to tell you something. This is going to be more important that you learn about emotional intelligence than any of your law texts that you're going to have to work with. I never paid attention to it. Do you know that book was on the shelf in the phone, in the email room in Danbury? There was a tiny little shelf and people just would throw books on it whenever they were done. And that book was sitting there and I picked it up and I read that book on my bunk. It changed my life. Emotional intelligence. And if we don't teach it and expose our young to it, not reading, writing, well, we had all that, but emotional intelligence, we can land on a prison bunk at 45 years old. So
There you go.
I would just say that it's something that's beautiful and that you can continue to explore and start to recognize your triggers, what pulls you, you know, what gets you off your center. That's emotional intelligence.
Well, we actually are, Janae, I'm so sorry, but we just ran out of time. And this conversation has just been, like you said, Andrea, exactly what I needed tonight. Didn't know it, but it was exactly what I needed tonight. And I just wanted to thank each and every one of you. I want to you know, just thank you for being true to who you are and bringing you to this conversation in every every aspect. And it was truly engaging, exciting. I wish we could talk for like another 30 minutes. It has been so good, but we are going to turn this over to Gia and Grace to end us for the evening. Thank you again, ladies, for sharing this space with me. And I can't wait for us to see each other on the other side doing some other things, right?